Colorado Territory, 1882. A stagecoach rumbles across the dusty plains, carrying Catherine Winters toward a future shrouded in uncertainty. At 36, she clutches a well-worn letter from a man named Samuel Cooper, promising a new beginning. At Silvercrest Ranch, the advertisement had seemed her salvation after losing everything in Philadelphia. But destiny has a strange way of unfolding. What awaits Catherine isn't the simple arrangement she expected, but a twist of fate that will challenge everything she believes about her worth, her strength, and her capacity for love. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The stagecoach hit another rut, jarring Catherine from her anxious thoughts. She smoothed her travel-worn skirt and peered through the dirt-streaked window. At the vast Colorado landscape, 3 days of travel had left her exhausted, her once elegant navy traveling dress now rumpled and dusty, but appearances hardly mattered when your entire life fit into a single trunk. "First time out west, ma'am?" asked the weathered man seated across from her, his leathery face creased by years under the harsh frontier sun. "Yes," Catherine replied, tucking a strand of chestnut hair back into place, conscious of the few silver threads that had begun to appear among the brown. "I'm to be married." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mail order?" When Catherine nodded, he simply said, "Brave choice, brave indeed." Catherine straightened her spine, dignity intact despite her circumstances. There was no shame in it. Countless women had made similar journeys westward, though most, she knew, were at least a decade younger than herself. At 36, she'd long passed the age considered suitable for marriage in Philadelphia society. After her father's business collapsed and his subsequent death left her destitute, she'd spent years caring for her ailing mother, watching her own prospects diminish with each passing season. When her mother finally passed 6 months ago, Catherine found herself utterly alone, with dwindling savings and few options. The advertisement in the matrimonial news had seemed like providence. "Established rancher seeks educated, sensible woman. As wife, must appreciate hard work and solitude, comfortable living and security offered in exchange for companionship and household management." Samuel Cooper's letters had been straightforward, but kind. He described Silvercrest Ranch as substantial and growing, with a respectable house built 3 years prior. He'd been candid about the isolation and harsh winters, but also wrote eloquently about the breathtaking beauty of the mountains and the freedom of life on the frontier. "Approaching Clearwater," called the driver from outside. Catherine's heart quickened. Samuel Cooper had written that he would meet her at the Clearwater stage station. She gathered her reticule and smoothed her hair one final time, wishing she could refresh her appearance after days of travel. "Good luck to you, ma'am," the weathered man said as the stagecoach slowed. The small town of Clearwater appeared modest but well-established, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple visible beyond. As the stagecoach rolled to a stop before a 2-story hotel, Catherine peered anxiously through the window, scanning the small crowd for a man who might be Samuel Cooper. He'd described himself as 45, with dark hair graying at the temples, of average height and sturdy build. Not handsome, he'd written with disarming honesty, but hard-working and respectable. The driver opened the door. "Clearwater stop, 20-minute rest before continuing to Silverton." Catherine descended carefully, her legs stiff from the journey. "Excuse me," she addressed the driver as he unloaded luggage. "I'm to be met by Mr. Samuel Cooper. Has he arrived?" The driver scratched his chin. "Cooper? Don't see him, ma'am. Folks sometimes run late out here. Distances can be deceiving." Anxiety fluttered in Catherine's chest as she surveyed the dusty street. What if he'd changed his mind? What if he took one look at her, 36 years old with the first signs of age beginning to show, and decided she wasn't what he wanted? She was nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia with barely $50 to her name. "You must be Miss Winters." Catherine turned to find a young man of perhaps 20 approaching. He wore a ranch hand's clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, his face open and friendly beneath a shock of sandy hair. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Name's William Turner, ma'am. I work at the neighboring property to Silvercrest." He removed his hat, respectfully. "Mr. Cooper asked me to meet you and explain the situation." Situation? Catherine's voice betrayed her concern. William looked uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am. There's been a complication. Mr. Cooper was called away unexpectedly to Denver on urgent business. His sister took ill suddenly." "I see." Catherine tried to mask her disappointment. "When will he return?" 3 days, ma'am. Perhaps 4. William shifted his weight. "He's arranged lodging for you at the hotel here until he returns. Everything's been paid for." As Catherine absorbed this information, the stagecoach driver approached with her trunk. "Where to, miss? Stage pulls out in 15 minutes if you're continuing on." "The lady will be staying at the hotel," William informed him, then turned back to Catherine. "If you'll follow me, Miss Winters, I'll help get you settled." The Clearwater Hotel proved clean and respectable, if simple. The proprietress, Mrs. Abigail Jenkins, a brisk woman with iron-grey hair and sharp eyes, showed Catherine to a small but tidy room on the second floor. "Mr. Cooper's message arrived yesterday," Mrs. Jenkins explained, opening the curtains to reveal a view of the main street. "Said you were to be made comfortable until his return. Meals are included, served at 7, noon, and 6 in the dining room." After Mrs. Jenkins departed and William had brought up her trunk, Catherine sank onto the narrow bed, fighting unexpected tears. The delay wasn't catastrophic, she reasoned. Perhaps it was even fortunate, a chance to recover from her journey before meeting her future husband, yet she couldn't quiet the whisper of doubt. Had Samuel Cooper truly been called away? Or had he somehow learned her age and lost his nerve? Catherine had been scrupulously honest in her letters, stating her age, plainly in her first response to his advertisement. His reply had been reassuring. Age brings wisdom and character, both valuable on the frontier where life demands resilience. Still, there was a significant difference between accepting a mature bride in principle and the reality of a woman, showing the first signs of her years. After washing away the worst of the travel dust and changing into her second-best dress, a modest grey wool with subtle lavender piping, Catherine ventured downstairs. The hotel's small dining room was nearly empty at this hour, with only an elderly couple seated by the window. Mrs. Jenkins appeared from the kitchen. "Early dinner, Miss Winters? You must be famished after your journey." "Thank you, that would be lovely." Catherine settled at a table, grateful for the proprietress's practical manner. As a bowl of surprisingly good beef stew was placed before her, the hotel door opened, admitting a tall man whose presence seemed to fill the modest room. Catherine noticed him only peripherally at first. His height, the breadth of his shoulders beneath a well-worn duster, the purposeful way he removed his hat to reveal thick, dark hair streaked with silver. "Mrs. Jenkins," his deep voice carried. Across the room, "I understand you received a new guest today." The proprietress gestured toward Catherine's table. "Miss Winters arrived on the afternoon stage. Mr. Cooper's intended." The man turned, and Catherine found herself fixed in the steady gaze of the most striking pair of blue eyes she'd ever encountered. They belonged to a face that spoke of years and experience, weathered but handsome, with strong features and a neatly trimmed beard, salt and peppered like his hair. Miss Winters. He approached her table with a slight limp that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. "I'm Nathaniel Blackwood. I own Evergreen Ranch, neighboring Silvercrest. "How do you do, Mr. Blackwood?" Catherine nodded politely, conscious of her travel-worn appearance before this imposing figure. "May I?" He gestured to the chair across from her. "Of course." As he settled into the chair, Catherine noted the fine quality of his clothing beneath. "The trail dust. This was no ordinary rancher. I wanted to welcome you to Clearwater personally," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying a cultured tone that surprised her, "and to clarify some details about your situation." "My situation?" Catherine tensed. "Your ranch hand, William, explained that Mr. Cooper has been delayed." Something flickered in Nathaniel Blackwood's expression. "William works for me, yes, but I'm afraid he may have simplified matters." Catherine set down her spoon, appetite vanishing. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel Blackwood studied her for a moment, as if measuring her capacity for difficult news. "Miss Winters, Samuel Cooper has not gone to Denver. He's here in Clearwater." "I don't understand." "He was at the stage station earlier today. He saw you disembark." The implication hung in the air between them. Catherine's face grew hot with humiliation as understanding dawned. "He saw me and decided he didn't want me." Nathaniel didn't soften the truth. "He instructed William to make excuses, yes. Cooper arranged your hotel stay for 3 nights, after which—" He didn't finish the sentence. Catherine sat perfectly still, dignity her only defense against the crushing wave of rejection and panic. 3 nights, then she would be alone, nearly penniless, 2,000 miles from anything familiar. "I see," she finally managed, her voice remarkably steady despite the turmoil within. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Blackwood. It seems I have decisions to make regarding my future." Nathaniel Blackwood's blue eyes held something that wasn't quite pity, perhaps respect. "Cooper is a fool," he said simply, "and not the man he represented himself to be in those advertisements. His ranch is mortgaged to the hilt, and his substantial house is little more than a glorified cabin with a sagging roof." Catherine absorbed this information, unsure whether it made her rejection better or worse. "You seem well informed about Mr. Cooper's affairs." A slight smile creased Nathaniel's weathered face. "In a community this small, little remains private, especially financial matters. I own the bank that holds his mortgage." He leaned forward slightly. "Miss Winters, while Cooper's behavior is inexcusable, perhaps it's fortunate you discovered his true character before binding yourself to him." "Fortunate?" Catherine couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "I find myself abandoned in a strange town with limited funds and no connections. Forgive me if I don't immediately recognize my good fortune." Rather than take offense, Nathaniel nodded. "Fair enough, which brings me to my proposition. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A proposition." Catherine's guard immediately rose. She'd had enough of men's propositions to last a lifetime. Nathaniel Blackwood seemed to read her thoughts. "Nothing improper, Miss Winters, I assure you." He signaled to Mrs. Jenkins, who brought him a cup of coffee before discreetly withdrawing. "Evergreen Ranch is the largest property in the county," he continued, warming his hands around the cup. 5,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, and a breeding program for some of the finest horses in Colorado Territory. Catherine waited, uncertain where this was leading. "My home is substantial, perhaps too substantial for a man living alone. Since my wife passed 5 years ago, I've employed a housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, but she's getting on in years and can no longer manage the full responsibilities." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "I've been seeking someone to bring order to my household affairs. Someone educated, sensible, and capable of overseeing domestic matters while I focus on the ranch operations." Catherine's confusion must have shown on her face because Nathaniel clarified, I'm offering you employment, Miss Winters, as my household manager. Of all the possibilities Catherine had considered since learning of Samuel Cooper's rejection, this hadn't been among them. You wish to hire me? You know nothing about me, Mr. Blackwood. I know you had the courage to travel 2,000 miles to build a new life. I know you've maintained your dignity despite Cooper's unconscionable behavior. His blue eyes assessed her with uncomfortable perception. And I suspect you're experienced in household management. Am I mistaken? No, Catherine admitted. I managed my father's household for many years, including during periods when we employed several servants. After his financial troubles, I continued to maintain our reduced circumstances with efficiency. Nathaniel nodded, as if confirming something to himself. The position includes private quarters in the east wing of the house, full board, and a monthly salary of $30. Catherine couldn't hide her surprise. The sum was generous, more than many schoolteachers earned. Too little? Nathaniel asked, misinterpreting her reaction. No, quite the contrary. It's very generous. But Mr. Blackwood, while I appreciate your offer, I must ask, why would you extend such an opportunity to a complete stranger? A shadow of something, perhaps loneliness, crossed his face before he answered. Qualified people are scarce in these parts, Miss Winters. When opportunity presents itself, decisive action is required. He set down his coffee cup. Consider it a business arrangement. If after 3 months either of us finds the arrangement unsatisfactory, we part ways with no ill feelings. Catherine weighed her options, which were painfully limited. Return east with her dwindling funds. Seek work in this small frontier town where opportunities for women were surely scarce. The practical choice was clear, even as her pride smarted at accepting charity disguised as employment. It seems I would be foolish to decline, she said finally. Though I must warn you, Mr. Blackwood, I will earn my keep. I won't accept charity. The hint of a smile touched his lips. I wouldn't offer it, Miss Winters. Evergreen Ranch isn't a charitable institution. He rose from the table. I've business in town tomorrow. I'll return for you the following morning, if that suits. That would be fine. Thank you. After Nathaniel departed, Catherine finished her meal mechanically, her mind working through this unexpected turn of events. Was she trading one uncertain situation for another? Yet something about Nathaniel Blackwood inspired confidence. Unlike Samuel Cooper, he seemed a man who meant what he said. The next day, Catherine used her unexpected respite to wash her travel-worn clothing, purchase a few necessities from the general store, and gather information about her new employer. The shopkeeper's wife proved a willing source. Mr. Blackwood owns half the county, I'd say. Came out from Boston 15 years back with his wife, Emma. Fine lady she was, Eastern educated, played the piano like an angel. Terrible shame about the fever that took her. They had no children, Catherine inquired, selecting a packet of hairpins. No, that was the tragedy of it. They wanted a family, something fierce. The woman leaned forward confidentially. Some say that's why he works from dawn till dusk, to forget what might have been. Catherine also learned that while respected, Nathaniel Blackwood was considered reserved, even austere by the townsfolk. Fair in his dealings, the shopkeeper confirmed, but not a man to cross. When the Madison brothers tried rustling his cattle 3 years back, he tracked them for 2 weeks before bringing them to justice. By the time Nathaniel's carriage arrived the following morning, Catherine had formed an impression of a complicated man, wealthy, respected, but perhaps isolated by both his position and his personal losses. She was ready at the appointed hour, her trunk packed, wearing her best day dress, a deep burgundy wool that had once been quite fashionable in Philadelphia. Though faded slightly at the seams, it still conveyed a dignity that Catherine was determined to maintain. Nathaniel himself drove the carriage, a well-sprung vehicle pulled by a matched pair of gleaming bay horses that spoke to their owners. Prosperity. He greeted her with formal courtesy, assisting with her trunk before helping her into the carriage. "It's an hour's journey to Evergreen," he explained as they left the small town behind. "The road improves once we pass Miller's Creek." The landscape opened before them, rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, the October sunshine casting everything in golden light. Despite her apprehension about the future, Catherine found herself captivated by the wild beauty surrounding them. "It's breathtaking," she admitted. Nathaniel glanced at her, something softening in his expression. "It is, though it can be harsh as well as beautiful. Winters here test one's character." "I'm not afraid of difficult conditions, Mr. Blackwood. Philadelphia winters can be quite severe. Indeed, though I imagine society compensates with adequate diversions." "For those who can afford them," Catherine replied, then wished she hadn't revealed so much about her reduced circumstances. They fell into silence, though not an uncomfortable one. Catherine used the opportunity to study her companion more carefully. In daylight, she could see that Nathaniel Blackwood was probably in his mid-40s. The lines around his eyes spoke of squinting into harsh sun and weather, while the set of his jaw suggested determination, perhaps even stubbornness. Yet there was something in his profile that hinted at gentler origins, an education and refinement at odds with the frontier setting. The shopkeeper had mentioned Boston, which explained the cultured undertone to his speech. As they crested a hill, Nathaniel slowed the horses. "Evergreen Ranch," he said simply, gesturing to the valley below. Catherine gasped despite herself. Nestled in the valley was not the rough frontier operation she had expected, but an estate that would have been impressive even in the east. A large two-story house of golden stone dominated the scene, surrounded by carefully maintained grounds. Beyond stood substantial outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and pastures stretching toward distant forests. "It's not what I expected," she managed. A ghost of a smile touched Nathaniel's lips. "Emma, my wife, refused to live in a glorified, cabin, as she called it. She designed the house herself, modeled after her family home in Massachusetts." As they approached, Catherine noted other surprising details. A formal garden to one side of the house, now fading into autumn browns, but still displaying a planned elegance, and what appeared to be a small orchard beyond. The carriage circled a gravel drive, coming to rest before wide stone steps. The massive oak door opened as they arrived, revealing an elderly woman with a severe bun and assessing eyes. "Miss Winters, this is Mrs. Fletcher, who has managed my household these past years," Nathaniel explained as he helped Catherine from the carriage. "Welcome to Evergreen, Miss Winters," Mrs. Fletcher said, her tone professional, if not warm. "Your rooms have been prepared." The interior of the house surprised Catherine as much as its exterior. While she had expected frontier practicality, the entrance hall featured polished wood floors, a sweeping staircase, and furniture that, while not ostentatious, spoke of quality and taste. Mrs. Fletcher led them through to a spacious parlor where tea had been set out. "I thought Miss Winters might appreciate refreshment before touring the house," she explained. "Excellent," Nathaniel approved. "Please show William where to place Miss Winters's trunk." Over tea, Nathaniel outlined Catherine's responsibilities. "The household staff is small. Mrs. Fletcher, who will assist with the transition before retiring, to her sister's home in Denver, Martha, the cook, Daniel, who serves as both butler and groundskeeper, and 2 maids, sisters Lucy and Jane." "A substantial staff for a single man," Catherine observed. Emma believed in maintaining proper standards. "Even on the frontier, I've continued her practices." Something in his tone warned against further comment on the subject. After tea, Mrs. Fletcher conducted Catherine on a tour of the house. 12 rooms in total, including a library filled with volumes that made Catherine's heart leap with unexpected joy. The east wing, where her quarters were located, proved to be a comfortable suite including a bedroom, small sitting room, and private bathroom, with modern plumbing that would have been luxurious even in Philadelphia. "This is far more than I anticipated," Catherine admitted to Mrs. Fletcher. The older woman's stern countenance softened slightly. "Mr. Blackwood is a fair employer, if demanding. He expects excellence, but rewards it accordingly." "And Mrs. Blackwood? What was she like?" Catherine asked, unable to suppress her curiosity about the woman whose presence still seemed to permeate the house. Mrs. Fletcher's expression grew distant, refined, determined. Not everyone understood her vision for Evergreen, but she transformed what could have been merely a successful ranch into something exceptional. That evening, Catherine dined with Nathaniel in a formal dining room that would not have been out of place in Boston or Philadelphia. The conversation remained largely practical: household schedules, upcoming social obligations, Nathaniel's preferences regarding meals and domestic arrangements. Only as Martha served coffee did Nathaniel broach a more personal subject. "Miss Winters, while I have no intention of prying into your private affairs, there is something I must ask." Catherine tensed, uncertain what was coming. Samuel Cooper is not a man to surrender easily, especially what he considers his property. Even a bride he rejected. Nathaniel's blue eyes held hers steadily. "If he should approach you, I would ask that you inform me immediately. You believe he might—" "What? Reconsider? Perhaps." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "Or perhaps simply object to what he might perceive as my stealing what was meant to be his." The implication sent a chill through Catherine. What kind of man had she almost married? "I understand," she said quietly, "and I appreciate your concern." After dinner, alone in her new quarters, Catherine stood at the window overlooking the moonlit grounds of Evergreen Ranch. 24 hours earlier, she had faced a future of uncertainty and likely poverty. Now she found herself in a position of responsibility and relative comfort, employed by a man whose character remained largely a mystery. As Catherine prepared for bed in the unexpectedly luxurious room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Evergreen Ranch harbored secrets, and that her role here might extend beyond merely managing a wealthy rancher's household. Catherine's first weeks at Evergreen Ranch passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Fletcher proved to be a thorough, if somewhat rigid, instructor, introducing Catherine to the complex workings of the household with military precision. "Mr. Blackwood expects the accounts reviewed weekly," the older woman explained, showing Catherine a leather-bound ledger filled with precise entries. "He's particular about knowing exactly where every penny goes. Not miserly, mind you, just orderly." Indeed, orderliness seemed to be Nathaniel Blackwood's defining characteristic. The ranch operated with remarkable efficiency, from the rotation of pastures for the prize cattle to the carefully planned menus that took advantage of seasonal produce from their own kitchen gardens. During those initial days, Catherine saw little of her employer. He rose before dawn and often returned only for the evening meal, consumed with preparations for the approaching winter. The few interactions they shared were cordial but brief, typically focused on household matters requiring his approval. "You're settling in well?" he inquired one evening as Martha served his preferred apple pie for dessert. "Very well, thank you," Catherine replied. "Mrs. Fletcher has been most thorough in her instruction." "Excellent. She plans to depart for Denver next week. I trust you feel prepared to assume full responsibilities?" The question carried a weight that gave Catherine pause. She had been at Evergreen barely 3 weeks. Was she truly ready to manage this substantial household independently? "I believe so," she answered honestly, "though I may occasionally need guidance on matters specific to ranch operations." Nathaniel nodded, seemingly satisfied. Daniel has been with Evergreen since its founding. He can advise on any ranch-related concerns. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "And of course, you may come to me directly with any questions." Something in his tone suggested this was a significant concession, and Catherine wondered how accessible her employer had been to Mrs. Fletcher over the years. The evening before Mrs. Fletcher's departure, the older woman requested a private conversation in Catherine's sitting room. To Catherine's surprise, she arrived bearing a silver tray with a delicate china teapot and 2 cups. "My mother's service," Mrs. Fletcher explained, seeing Catherine's questioning look. "The one luxury I brought west with me. I thought we might have a proper tea before I leave." As she poured the fragrant brew, her usual brisk manner softened. "Miss Winters, there are things about Evergreen and Mr. Blackwood that don't appear in any household ledger." Catherine accepted her teacup, suddenly alert. "I'm listening." Mrs. Fletcher settled back in her chair. "This is not merely a ranch, but a refuge of sorts. Mr. Blackwood has created something rare here, a place of beauty and order in a land where both are easily lost. I've noticed his attention to detail," Catherine acknowledged. "It goes beyond detail." Mrs. Fletcher's voice took on an unexpected passion. "When the Blackwoods first arrived from Boston, this valley held nothing but a crude cabin and wild grassland. Others saw only cattle country. Emma Blackwood saw possibility. Catherine had heard fragments about the late Mrs. Blackwood, but nothing substantial. She must have been a remarkable woman. She was. Visionary, determined. Mrs. Fletcher's eyes took on a distant quality. She designed the gardens, ordered trees from back east, insisted on materials for the house that had to be freighted at enormous expense. The locals thought her mad, or worse, pretentious, but she persevered. And Mr. Blackwood supported her vision? Completely. They were a true partnership. When she fell ill, Mrs. Fletcher paused, emotion briefly overcoming her composure. The fever took her in just 8 days. Nathaniel was devastated. But instead of abandoning her dreams for Evergreen, he has spent the past 5 years perfecting every detail she planned. Catherine absorbed this information, seeing her employer in a new light, not merely a successful rancher, but a man honoring a profound loss through relentless dedication. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. Mrs. Fletcher set down her teacup with precision. "Because understanding Evergreen means understanding its heart, and because Nathaniel Blackwood needs someone who sees his work for what it truly is, not mere perfectionism, but an act of devotion." Before Catherine could respond, Mrs. Fletcher straightened, her practical manner returning. "Now, about the household schedule for November. I've taken the liberty of drafting suggestions based on past years." The conversation shifted to practicalities, but Catherine's mind lingered on the revelations. That night, she viewed the elegant house around her differently, not as simply a wealthy man's showplace, but as a memorial built stone by stone, a promise kept to a woman long gone. After Mrs. Fletcher's departure, Catherine assumed full responsibility for Evergreen's domestic operations. The transition proved smoother than she had anticipated. The staff, initially reserved, gradually warmed. To her practical, respectful management style, Martha, the cook, was the first to openly approve. "Mrs. Fletcher meant well," she confided one morning as Catherine reviewed the week's menus with her, "but that woman never set foot in the kitchen before coming west. You understand food is more than just entries in an account book." Daniel, the taciturn butler groundskeeper, took longer to win over. A man of few words, he communicated largely through nods and brief phrases. It was only after Catherine consulted him about replacing worn carpeting in the main hall that he showed a glimmer of approval. Mrs. Blackwood would have chosen the same. He said, examining the sample Catherine had selected from town. Coming from Daniel, this appeared to be high praise indeed. Meanwhile, Catherine's relationship with Nathaniel remained formal, but evolved into a comfortable routine. Each morning, they breakfasted together in the small morning room, reviewing the day's plans. Each evening, they dined in the formal dining room, their conversations gradually expanding beyond household matters to books they had read, experiences in the East, and occasionally the future of Colorado Territory. "Governor Pitkin believes statehood is inevitable," Nathaniel remarked one evening in late November as snow fell softly outside the dining room windows. "Perhaps within the next 5 years. Do you welcome the prospect?" Catherine asked, finding herself genuinely interested in his opinion. Nathaniel considered this as he swirled the brandy in his glass. "Progress is inevitable, though not always comfortable. Statehood will bring advantages, better infrastructure, more stable governance, but also more people, more constraints." "You value your independence," Catherine observed. His blue eyes met hers with unexpected directness. "Don't we all, Miss Winters? Isn't that why you traveled west? To forge your own path, rather than accept the limited options Eastern society allows a woman in your circumstances?" The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "though necessity played a greater role than aspiration. In my case, necessity is often the beginning of transformation." Something in his tone suggested he spoke from experience. As winter settled fully over Evergreen Ranch, Catherine found herself increasingly appreciative of the substantial house that sheltered them from Colorado's fierce storms. The stone walls, thick carpets, and well-designed fireplaces created an oasis of warmth while wind howled across the valley. Life at Evergreen developed a pleasing rhythm. Mornings devoted to household management, afternoons to correspondence and accounts, evenings to reading in the library or conversation with Nathaniel when he wasn't occupied with ranch business. Catherine wrote regularly to her only remaining relative, a cousin in Baltimore, describing her new life in carefully chosen words. She found herself reluctant to fully convey the complexity of her situation. Her growing admiration for Evergreen, her evolving understanding of its owner, and her own surprising contentment in a role so different from anything she had imagined. The first real disruption to this established pattern came a week before Christmas, when Daniel announced an unexpected visitor had arrived despite the recent snowfall. "Sheriff Taylor requests to see Mr. Blackwood," he informed Catherine, who was arranging evergreen boughs along the main staircase. "Urgent business, he says." Catherine located Nathaniel in his study, reviewing breeding records. "Sheriff Taylor is here," she informed him. "Daniel says it appears important." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "Show him in, please." Catherine was withdrawing discreetly when Nathaniel surprised her. "Miss Winters, I'd prefer you to stay." The sheriff, a weather-beaten man with alert eyes and a drooping mustache, entered with a blast of cold air still clinging to his heavy coat. After cursory greetings, he got straight to his purpose. "Cooper's back," he announced without preamble. "Returned from Denver yesterday." Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather. Though Samuel Cooper had played no part in her daily life at Evergreen, his rejection had left a wound to her pride that remained tender. Nathaniel's face revealed nothing. "I see. And this concerns me how, exactly?" Sheriff Taylor shifted uncomfortably. "He's been at Holloway's saloon since noon, drinking heavily and making claims that might interest you." "What claims?" Nathaniel's voice remained level, but Catherine noticed his hand tighten slightly around the pen he held. "Says you stole his mail-order bride." The sheriff's eyes flicked briefly to Catherine. "Says you did it deliberate-like, to gain control of his water rights." "That's absurd," Catherine interjected, unable to contain herself. Mr. Cooper rejected me sight unseen. Mr. Blackwood merely offered employment when I found myself stranded. Sheriff... Taylor nodded apologetically. No offense intended, ma'am. I'm just relaying what's being said. Cooper's threatening to file a formal complaint with the territorial authorities. Nathaniel set down his pen with deliberate care. On what grounds? Miss Winters is a free woman who entered into employment willingly. There are no laws against hiring competent household staff. True enough, the sheriff conceded. But Cooper's been gathering support among some of the smaller ranchers, playing on their fears about your growing influence in the valley. Catherine watched Nathaniel absorb this information, his face impassive except for a slight tightening around his eyes. Thank you for the warning, Sheriff, he said finally. I'll consider how best to address these rumors. After the sheriff departed, Nathaniel remained silent for long moments, staring at the snow falling beyond his study window. Mr. Blackwood, Catherine ventured finally, I deeply regret being the cause of this difficulty. You are not the cause, he interrupted, turning to face her with unexpected intensity. Cooper's allegations are merely a convenient excuse. The real issue is the North Valley water rights. He's been trying to gain control of that watershed for years. Catherine tried to follow this shift in topic. Water rights? What do they have to do with me? Nathaniel's expression softened slightly. Nothing directly, but Cooper is a desperate man facing financial ruin. He needs someone to blame for his failures, and we present a convenient target. The use of "we" didn't escape Catherine's notice. Somehow, in Nathaniel Blackwood's mind, she had become aligned with Evergreen's interests rather than an outside observer to them. What will you do? She asked. First, I need to understand exactly what we're facing. He moved to his desk and began writing rapidly. Cooper has allies, but so do I. It's time to call on them. As Catherine watched Nathaniel draft messages to be dispatched to neighboring properties, she realized how deeply her fate had become intertwined with Evergreen Ranch. What had begun as simple employment had evolved into something more complex, a position that now placed her at the center of territorial politics and personal vendettas. And somewhere along the way, without fully acknowledging it, Catherine had come to care deeply about Evergreen's future, and the man who had created it from one woman's vision and his own determination. The days leading up to Christmas brought a tense atmosphere to Evergreen Ranch. Nathaniel spent long hours in consultation with neighboring landowners, received frequent updates from contacts in town, and pored over maps and legal documents late into the night. Catherine maintained the household's festive preparations, determined that the brewing conflict would not overshadow the holiday. She supervised the hanging of evergreen garlands, arranged for special ingredients for Martha's Christmas baking, and even organized the annual gift distribution to the ranch hands' families, a tradition Emma Blackwood had established years before. One afternoon, as Catherine was placing candles on the massive pine tree Daniel had erected in the main parlor, Nathaniel entered unexpectedly. He paused in the doorway, watching her work. Emma always insisted on real candles, he said quietly, despite the fire risk. Catherine turned, surprised by both his presence and the personal nature of his comment. They create a special magic, don't they? Though we'll light them only briefly, of course. Nathaniel moved further into the room, studying the decorations with an assessing eye. You've captured the essence of her vision, the greenery, the red ribbons, the arrangement of the nativity scene on the mantel. It's as if she directed it herself. Catherine felt a curious mix of pleasure and uncertainty at his words. Was she merely replicating another woman's traditions, or creating something of her own at Evergreen? I followed Mrs. Fletcher's detailed notes, she explained, though I did add the dried orange slices among the greenery, my mother's tradition. Nathaniel's gaze lingered on the citrus rounds, their translucent centers glowing amber against the dark evergreen boughs. A beautiful addition. Emma would have approved of personal touches. He seemed about to say more when Daniel appeared at the doorway. "Mr. Ellsworth has arrived, sir." Nathaniel's expression shifted back to business. "Thank you, Daniel. Show him to my study." To Catherine, he added, "Ellsworth is my attorney from Denver. He'll be staying through Christmas." As December progressed, more guests arrived. A judge from Denver, 2 prominent ranchers from neighboring counties, a railroad representative from Chicago. Each was welcomed with the refined hospitality that characterized Evergreen, while Catherine observed the strategic discussions from a careful distance. Though Nathaniel never explicitly excluded her from these conversations, neither did he invite her participation. She gathered fragments. Cooper had indeed filed a formal complaint with the territorial authorities, alleging that Nathaniel had deliberately sabotaged his arranged marriage as part of a scheme to force him into bankruptcy. The accusation seemed absurd on its face, yet had gained surprising traction among certain factions. "It's the North Valley," she overheard the judge explaining one evening as the men lingered over brandy in the study. "Cooper's property borders the upper watershed. If he fails, Blackwood could acquire the land and control the entire water system." "I've never expressed interest in Cooper's worthless acreage," Nathaniel responded, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "Doesn't matter," the railroad man countered. "It's about perception. Cooper's painted you as an empire builder, crushing the small rancher underfoot. Add in this business with the mail-order bride, and it becomes a compelling narrative." Catherine withdrew silently, disturbed by how her personal humiliation had become a weapon in territorial politics. Later that night, alone in her sitting room, she drafted a letter of resignation. If her presence was creating difficulties for the man who had shown her such kindness, perhaps the honorable choice was to remove herself from the situation. 3 times she composed the letter. 3 times she set it aside, dissatisfied. The truth was, she didn't want to leave Evergreen. In just 2 months, she had found not merely employment but purpose. The household responded to her management, the staff respected her judgment, and she had grown increasingly convinced that her capabilities were genuinely valued. And then there was Nathaniel himself. Their relationship remained formally correct, yet Catherine couldn't deny a growing connection that transcended employer and employee. Their evening conversations had become something she anticipated each day. His insights, his occasional dry humor, his evident respect for her opinions when she ventured them. Christmas Eve arrived with a light snowfall that transformed Evergreen into a scene from a fairy tale. The house glowed with candlelight, the air fragrant with pine and spices. Despite the serious matters under discussion, even Nathaniel's most pragmatic guests couldn't resist the holiday atmosphere Catherine had created. Following tradition, the household gathered in the main parlor after dinner. Ranch hands and their families joined the household staff and distinguished guests for carol singing, accompanied by Catherine on the grand piano, a skill she had initially been reluctant to reveal, but which Nathaniel had encouraged once he discovered it. As Catherine played Silent Night, she glanced up to find Nathaniel watching her from across the room, his expression unguarded for once. Something in his eyes, a blend of appreciation, melancholy, and something warmer, caused her fingers to falter momentarily on the keys. Later, as the gathering dispersed and guests retired to their rooms, Nathaniel approached her by the dying fire. "You've given Evergreen its heart back tonight," he said quietly. "Thank you." Catherine felt a flush of pleasure at his words. "I merely continued traditions already established." "No," he countered gently. "Emma created the forms, but you filled them with life again. There's a difference." After a moment's hesitation, he removed a small package from his pocket. I had intended to give this to you tomorrow with the general gift exchange, but perhaps now is better. Catherine accepted the package, wrapped in silver paper and tied with blue ribbon. This is unexpected, Mr. Blackwood. Nathaniel, he corrected her. At least tonight. She nodded, uncharacteristically flustered, as she carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant on a fine chain. The design was simple but exquisite, a mountain range in silhouette with a single star above. It's beautiful, she breathed. It represents Evergreen, Nathaniel explained. The view from the east ridge at dawn, when the morning star is still visible. Emma commissioned it from a silversmith in Denver, our first Christmas here. Catherine looked up in surprise. This was your wife's? Yes. His voice was soft but steady. She always said it represented promise, the promise of a new day, a new beginning. He met Catherine's gaze directly. It seems fitting that you should have it now. The significance of such a gift wasn't lost on Catherine. This wasn't merely a token from employer to valued employee, but something deeply personal, an acknowledgement of her place at Evergreen that went beyond her official role. Before she could formulate a response, voices in the hallway announced the return of several guests from a late-night smoke on the veranda. The moment of intimacy shattered. Nathaniel stepped back, his formal manner returning. "Merry Christmas, Miss Winters," he said, his voice deliberately louder for the benefit of those entering. "I trust you'll find time to rest, despite the busy day ahead." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, following his lead in resuming their public personas. "Merry Christmas to you as well." That night, Catherine stood at her bedroom window, watching snowflakes drift past in the moonlight. The silver pendant lay cool against her skin beneath her nightdress, a tangible reminder of the unspoken connection growing between herself and the master of Evergreen Ranch. Christmas Day passed in a blur of festivity, gifts exchanged, a magnificent dinner served, traditional games played before the fire. If the assembled guests noticed a new warmth in the interactions between Nathaniel and his household manager, they gave no sign. It was the day after Christmas, when everything changed. The household was settling back into its normal rhythm. Most guests having departed that morning. Only Judge Harrington and Mr. Ellsworth, the attorney, remained, scheduled to leave the following day. Catherine was in the library, organizing the books that had been disturbed during the holiday gathering, when she heard the commotion at the front door. Raised voices, heavy footsteps, Daniel's usually measured tone sharp with concern. Setting aside the volumes, she moved toward the entrance hall, where she found an alarming scene unfolding. Sheriff Taylor stood just inside the door, snow melting from his hat and coat. Beside him, red-faced and disheveled, stood Samuel Cooper. "I demand to see Blackwood," Cooper was shouting, his words slightly slurred. "Where is he?" Daniel maintained his position, blocking further entry. "Mr. Blackwood is occupied, if you wish to leave a message." "No messages!" Cooper lurched forward, revealing a holstered pistol at his hip. "I've come for what's mine." Catherine froze at the edge of the hall, her presence momentarily unnoticed by the men. This was Samuel Cooper, the man whose rejection had altered the course of her life. Seeing him now, with his bloodshot eyes and unkempt appearance, she felt not humiliation, but a profound relief at her narrow escape. Sheriff Taylor placed a restraining hand on Cooper's arm. "Easy now, Samuel. I brought you here as a courtesy, not to cause trouble, Miss Winters." Cooper had spotted her. His gaze, unfocused from drink but still recognizably calculating, assessed her from head to toe. "There she is. The bride thief stole from me." Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. "Mr. Cooper, you chose to reject our arrangement. When I arrived in Clearwater, Mr. Blackwood simply offered me employment when I found myself stranded." "Lies," Cooper spat. It was all arranged between you. I know how Blackwood operates, always 10 steps ahead, manipulating events to his advantage. Sheriff Taylor tightened his grip on Cooper's arm. That's enough, Samuel. You're making accusations without proof. I have proof now, Cooper retorted. Found it yesterday. The deed transfer from 79, showing Blackwood already had his eye on my water rights years ago. He fumbled in his coat with his free hand, producing a crumpled document, evidence of the conspiracy. Catherine heard measured footsteps behind her and turned to see Nathaniel approaching, his expression controlled, but his eyes assessing the situation with dangerous intensity. Cooper, he acknowledged coolly. Sheriff, to what do I owe this intrusion? Before the sheriff could respond, Cooper wrenched free of his grip, brandishing the document. You planned it all, bringing your mail-order bride to my doorstep, knowing I'd reject a woman that age, then swooping in to rescue her, all to pressure me into selling the North Valley. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but Catherine saw his posture shift. As subtly, a fighter's stance, prepared for trouble. Your allegations are both insulting and absurd, Nathaniel replied evenly. Miss Winters answered your own advertisement. Your rejection of her was entirely your decision. And as for the North Valley, I've expressed no interest in your property. Cooper's face darkened. Then explain this. He thrust the document toward Nathaniel. A survey of the watershed, commissioned by you 3 years ago. You've been planning this all along. Judge Harrington had emerged from the study, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? Justice, Your Honor, Cooper exclaimed, recognizing the judge. Evidence of Blackwood's scheme to seize control of the entire valley. As Cooper turned toward the judge, his coat fell open, revealing the pistol more clearly. Sheriff Taylor moved quickly, attempting to secure the weapon, but Cooper reacted. With unexpected speed, drawing the gun and backing toward the door. Stay back, he ordered, waving the pistol erratically between Nathaniel and the sheriff. I'm leaving with my evidence. The governor himself will hear about this conspiracy. Catherine watched in horror as Cooper's unsteady hand caused the pistol to waver dangerously. Without conscious thought, she stepped forward, directly into his line of sight. Mr. Cooper, she said calmly, please put down the weapon. Whatever grievances exist can be addressed without violence. Cooper's bloodshot eyes fixed on her, confusion momentarily replacing anger. You, he slurred, you were supposed to be my wife, my property. Then you aligned yourself with him. I aligned myself with common decency, Catherine replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Something you know nothing about, Cooper's face contorted with rage. You aging spinster, you think you're too good for Samuel Cooper? His hand tightened on the pistol, raising it toward her. Nobody disrespects me like that. Several things happened simultaneously. Sheriff Taylor lunged forward. Judge Harrington shouted a warning, and Nathaniel Blackwood moved with astonishing speed, placing himself directly between Catherine and the wavering pistol. The pistol discharged with a deafening crack that echoed through Evergreen's entrance hall. Catherine's scream caught in her throat as Nathaniel staggered, one hand clutching his upper arm, where blood already seeped through his fine shirt. Despite his injury, Nathaniel lunged forward with surprising agility, driving his shoulder into Cooper's chest. The two men crashed against the doorframe, the pistol clattering to the floor. Sheriff Taylor moved swiftly, kicking the weapon aside while Judge Harrington shouted for assistance. Daniel and 2 ranch hands who had been nearby rushed in, helping the sheriff subdue Cooper, who continued to struggle and shout incoherently about conspiracies and water rights. Through the chaos, Catherine's focus remained fixed on Nathaniel. He leaned heavily against the wall, face pale but composed, despite the spreading crimson stain on his sleeve. "Are you hurt?" she asked urgently, reaching his side. "Merely grazed," he replied through clenched teeth, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Cooper's aim is as poor as his judgment. We need to attend to that wound immediately. Catherine turned to Daniel. Please fetch my sewing kit and the medicinal supplies from the kitchen pantry. Martha will know which ones. As Cooper was dragged away, still hurling threats and accusations, Catherine guided Nathaniel to his study. The room's warmth and familiarity, leather-bound books, the lingering scent of pipe tobacco, a fire crackling in the grate, created an incongruous backdrop for the urgency of the moment. "Your jacket, please," Catherine instructed, her voice steadier than she felt. "And shirt, I need to see the extent of the damage." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, a hint of his usual composure returning despite the pain. "Rather direct, Miss Winters." "This is hardly the time for propriety," she countered, helping him remove his jacket. The sleeve of his shirt was soaked with blood, the fine white cotton ruined beyond salvage. When Martha arrived with hot water, clean cloths, and a basket of medical supplies, Catherine dismissed her with a quiet reassurance. "I can manage. Please see that everyone else is calm. No need for the entire household to be disrupted." Once alone with Nathaniel, Catherine cut away the bloodied sleeve with small silver scissors from her sewing kit. The wound beneath was ugly, but not life-threatening, a deep furrow across the outside of his upper arm where the bullet had torn through flesh without striking bone. "You'll need stitches," she informed him, cleansing the wound with antiseptic that made him inhale sharply. "I presume there's a doctor in town who could be summoned?" 12 miles in a snowstorm for a flesh wound. Nathaniel shook his head. "Unnecessary. This isn't my first injury, Miss Winters." "Catherine," she corrected him softly, "I believe when a man takes a bullet meant for you, first names become appropriate." Their eyes met briefly, acknowledging the shift between them. "Catherine," he agreed, "and I've seen you sew fine enough seams to trust your needlework." Threading a curved needle with catgut, Catherine steeled herself. During her mother's illness, she had performed various nursing duties, but never something quite so daunting as stitching human flesh. "This will hurt," she warned. "I'm aware." His jaw tightened. "Please proceed." Catherine worked methodically, each stitch placed with careful precision. Nathaniel remained silent throughout the procedure, though beads of sweat formed on his brow. As she closed the wound with 12 neat stitches, "You've done this before," he observed, as she applied a healing salve and began bandaging his arm. "Never," she admitted. "But I've always had steady hands, and the principle isn't so different from fine needlework." A fortunate skill for frontier life. His voice was strained but appreciative. "You continue to reveal unexpected talents, Catherine." She secured the bandage with a small knot. "I suspect we all contain unexpected depths when circumstances demand them." Once the wound was properly dressed, Catherine helped Nathaniel into a clean shirt that Daniel had brought. The immediate crisis had passed, but the implications of what had occurred, Cooper's accusations, the violence, Nathaniel's unhesitating protection, hung in the air between them. "Why did you do it?" she asked finally. "Step in front of that." "Pistol?" Nathaniel's expression remained guarded. "Would you have preferred I allow Cooper to shoot you?" The man was clearly unhinged. "No, but—" Catherine searched for words. "You risked your life. For an employee." Something flashed in Nathaniel's eyes, frustration perhaps, or a deeper emotion she couldn't name. "Is that truly how you see yourself? Merely an employee?" Before she could formulate a response, Judge Harrington appeared at the study door. "Sheriff has Cooper locked up in town," he reported. "Given the circumstances, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, he'll be facing serious charges." Nathaniel nodded. "Good. And the document he was waving about?" The judge produced a crumpled paper. It's nothing but a standard watershed survey, common practice for any large property, certainly no evidence of conspiracy." "As I suspected," Nathaniel said grimly. Cooper was grasping at shadows, trying to blame others for his financial troubles. After the judge withdrew, silence settled over the study again. Catherine busied herself cleaning up the medical supplies, her mind whirling with questions she dared not ask. "You should rest," she said finally. "Blood loss, even from a relatively minor wound, takes a toll on the body." Nathaniel rose, moving with deliberate care to avoid jarring his injured arm. "First, I believe we have an unfinished conversation." Catherine stilled, her hands clasped before her. "About my position here?" "About your place here," he corrected, "which has evolved considerably from our initial arrangement, has it not?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I have grown fond of Evergreen," she acknowledged carefully, "and I believe my work here has value beyond what I initially anticipated." "Your work," Nathaniel repeated, a hint of frustration coloring his tone. "Always so precise, so proper." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. "Did it never occur to you that you might be valued for more than your efficiency with household accounts?" Catherine's heart quickened. "Mr. Blackwood, Nathaniel, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that when Cooper raised that pistol, my only thought was protecting you, not my household." "Manager, you, Catherine." His voice softened. "The woman who brought music back to Evergreen, who adds orange slices to the Christmas greenery, who faces down armed men with remarkable composure." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned from years of ranch work. "I'm saying that I've come to care for you far beyond the bounds of our professional arrangement." Catherine struggled to process his words, emotions washing through her in dizzying succession. Disbelief, joy, uncertainty. "But your wife, Emma's presence is everywhere at Evergreen. Her vision shaped everything here." "Yes," Nathaniel acknowledged. "Emma created Evergreen. Her dreams gave it form." His fingers tightened around hers. "But you, Catherine, have given it life again, given me life again, when I thought that part of my existence was finished." For a moment, Catherine couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his eyes. When she finally found her voice, it emerged barely above a whisper. "What of Cooper's accusations? The community will talk. They'll say I schemed my way into your household, that our relationship was improper from the beginning." "Let them talk," Nathaniel replied with unexpected vehemence. "Those whose opinions matter know the truth. The rest can speculate until the snow melts in July, for all I care." Despite the gravity of the moment, Catherine found herself smiling at his defiance. A rather undiplomatic position for the most influential man in the valley. "I've never claimed to be a diplomat." His expression softened. "Only a man who recognizes value where others see only years." The reference to Cooper's rejection was unmistakable, and Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "My age wasn't the only reason he rejected me, I suspect. My independence likely unsettled him as well." "His profound loss," Nathaniel murmured, "and my immeasurable gain." He swayed slightly, the strain of his injury finally manifesting. Catherine instinctively steadied him, her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath. Her palm. "You need to rest," she insisted. "Doctor's orders." A hint of his usual wry humor resurfaced. "I wasn't aware you'd acquired medical credentials, along with your many other talents." "Common sense requires no formal training," she countered, guiding him toward the door. "We can continue this conversation when you're stronger." As they reached the doorway, Nathaniel paused, his good arm braced against the frame. For a moment he simply studied her face, as if memorizing each feature. Then, with a gentleness that belied his imposing stature, he bent and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, but unmistakably tender. A question and a promise combined. When he drew back, his blue eyes searched hers. "Something to consider while I rest," he said softly. That night, alone in her quarters, Catherine stood before her mirror, fingers tracing the silver pendant at her throat. The woman reflected back at her bore little resemblance to the desperate, travel-worn figure who had stepped off the stagecoach in Clearwater months ago. Her face remained the same, the fine lines at her eyes and mouth that had so dismayed Samuel. Cooper still present, but something fundamental had shifted in her expression. Confidence, perhaps, or simply the peace of having found her place in the world. Nathaniel's kiss lingered in her memory, warm and startlingly right. Yet doubts crept in as the night deepened. Was she merely a replacement for the remarkable Emma, whose vision still shaped every corner of Evergreen? Could a man like Nathaniel Blackwood, wealthy, respected, capable of attracting any young woman in the territory, truly value a woman society deemed past her prime? The following morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Catherine rose early, her restless night leaving her eager for activity. She was reviewing household accounts in the morning room when Daniel appeared with unexpected news. "Riders approaching. From town," he announced. "Sheriff Taylor and several others." Catherine's heart sank. More trouble with Cooper, no doubt. "Please inform Mr. Blackwood. He's resting in his room." "Already done, ma'am. He's meeting them in the study." When Catherine entered the study a short while later with coffee for the visitors, she found a tense gathering. Sheriff Taylor stood near the window, hat in hand. Judge Harrington and Mr. Ellsworth were seated by the desk, expressions grave. Nathaniel himself stood by the fireplace, his injured arm in a sling, his face set in lines of controlled anger. "Escape," he was saying as Catherine entered. "How is that possible?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Deputy Williams was inexperienced. Cooper convinced him he needed medical attention for a head injury. When Williams opened the cell, Cooper overpowered him. "And now he's armed again," Nathaniel stated flatly. "I'm afraid so." Took the deputy's pistol. The sheriff's gaze flickered to Catherine. "Given his threats yesterday and his current state of mind, we have reason to believe he may target Evergreen and its residents." Judge Harrington cleared his throat. "Specifically, Miss Winters." Cooper seemed fixated on the idea that she was central to some conspiracy against him. Catherine set down the coffee tray with steady hands, refusing to display the fear that coiled in her stomach. "So I've become a target because a man I never met before, coming west, decided I was too old to be his bride, then changed his mind and decided I was part of an elaborate plot against him." "The man is unbalanced," Mr. Ellsworth observed, "but dangerous nonetheless." Nathaniel crossed to Catherine's side, his uninjured arm brushing hers in a gesture of subtle support. "What precautions are being taken?" he asked the sheriff. "I've deputized several men. We're searching the area between town and here. Cooper's not thinking clearly, but he knows this territory. He could hole up almost anywhere. And in the meantime," Nathaniel's voice held an edge, "are we simply to wait for him to appear on the doorstep with murderous intent?" Judge Harrington rose. "We've discussed this, Sheriff. Given the imminent threat, I believe the suggested protective measure is appropriate." Sheriff Taylor nodded, reluctantly. "Judge has authorized an emergency marriage license. If you and Miss Winters were to marry immediately, it would legally invalidate any claim Cooper might make regarding prior arrangement or agreement." Catherine stared at the men in shock. "Marriage as a legal protection? A formality only," the judge hastened to add, "to establish clear legal status during this emergency. It could be annulled later if—" He trailed off, apparently realizing the indelicacy of his suggestion. Nathaniel's expression had gone completely unreadable. "I believe Miss Winters and I require a moment of privacy to discuss this unusual proposal." As the other men filed out, closing the study door behind them, Catherine turned to Nathaniel, her emotions in turmoil. "This is absurd. Marriage as A legal shield against a madman's accusations. Absurd, Nathaniel agreed, his voice strangely distant, though perhaps not for the reasons you think. Catherine watched him move to the window, his profile sharp against the morning light. What do you mean? He turned to face her, his expression softening. I had planned to approach this subject differently, with considerably more romance and significantly less legal expediency. Understanding dawned slowly. You had already considered marriage? She asked carefully. I've considered little else since Christmas Eve, he admitted, though I imagined a proper courtship first. Time for you to be certain of your feelings, Catherine's breath caught. And now circumstances force your hand. Not my feelings, Nathaniel, and corrected, moving closer. Only the timing of their expression. He took her hand gently in his. Catherine Winters, I find myself in the unexpected position of proposing marriage for your legal protection when what I truly wish to offer is my heart. He smiled ruefully, gesturing to his sling. I'm hardly at my most impressive, and the circumstances leave much to be desired. But my intent is sincere. Catherine studied his face, searching for any hint of obligation or duty behind his words. She found only warmth, sincerity, and something deeper that made her heart race. You understand what people will say? She asked softly. That I manipulated my way into becoming mistress of Evergreen. That you married a woman past her prime out of some misplaced sense of protection. I understand that people with small minds rarely comprehend larger truths, Nathaniel replied. The truth being that I, Nathaniel Blackwood, have had the extraordinary good fortune to find a woman of intelligence, courage, and beauty who makes Evergreen and me complete in ways I never imagined possible. His blue eyes held hers steadily. The question is not what others will say, but what you will say. If this proposal comes too soon, or if your feelings don't match mine, speak honestly. The legal protection can be arranged through other means. Catherine felt tears gathering unexpectedly. Not sad tears, but the release of something long held in check. Hope, perhaps, or the simple joy of being truly seen and valued. Do you know, she said, her voice unsteady, what it means to a woman my age to be chosen? Not settled for, not accepted despite my years, but genuinely chosen. Nathaniel's expression softened further. Do you know what it means to a widower who believed his heart permanently scarred to discover it's still capable of love? The word hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Love, not convenience, not practicality, not legal protection. Love. Catherine stepped closer, eliminating the last distance between them. Yes, she said simply. Yes? Nathaniel repeated, a rare uncertainty in his voice. Yes to your proposal. Yes to becoming mistress of Evergreen, not through employment but through marriage. Yes to building a future together, regardless of what brought us to this moment. The smile that transformed Nathaniel's face held a boyish delight at odds with his usual reserve. You understand that I'm unlikely to become less stubborn or opinionated with age? And you understand that I've spent too many years developing my independence to surrender it completely, even for Evergreen's master. His laugh was warm and genuine. I would expect nothing less. He sobered slightly. There remains the matter of Cooper and his threats. We'll face that challenge as we've faced others, Catherine said with newfound confidence. Together. As Nathaniel bent to seal their agreement with a kiss, Catherine felt the weight of years, of societal judgment, of narrowed expectations, of diminished value, fall away like snow melting in spring sunshine. What remained was the surprising truth that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive, not when we're young and hopeful, but when we've gathered enough wisdom to truly appreciate their worth. The wedding took place that afternoon in Evergreen's Maine parlor, No elaborate preparations, no formal announcements, simply a necessary response to an immediate threat, or so the official explanation went. Yet despite the urgent circumstances, Catherine found herself moved by the unexpectedly meaningful ceremony. Judge Harrington officiated with solemn dignity. Daniel and Martha served as witnesses, their initial surprise at the sudden marriage, giving way to what appeared to be genuine approval. Nathaniel had somehow procured a simple gold band from his safe. Emma's mother's ring, he explained quietly, which his late wife had never worn, preferring her own distinctive emerald. "If this troubles you," he began. But Catherine shook her head. "It seems appropriate," she assured him. "A connection to family history, not a replacement of memories." Standing before the judge, exchanging vows with a man she had known barely. 3 months, Catherine experienced not doubt but a curious sense of rightness. This wasn't the future she had imagined when answering Samuel Cooper's advertisement, but perhaps it was the future she had been moving toward all along, one where her maturity and experience were assets rather than liabilities. After the brief ceremony, Mr. Ellsworth outlined the legal implications of their marriage. "Cooper's claim of prior arrangement is now legally void," he explained. "And as Mrs. Blackwood, your position at Evergreen is unassailable." "My position was never in question," Catherine replied with quiet dignity, "not to those whose opinions matter." As word spread through the ranch, reactions varied from stunned disbelief to knowing smiles. William, the young ranch hand who had first met Catherine in Clearwater, seemed particularly pleased. Knew Mr. Blackwood wasn't just hiring household help that day, he confided to Catherine when he came to offer congratulations. Never seen him ride into town and back so quick as when he heard Cooper's mail-order bride had arrived and been left stranded. This revelation gave Catherine pause. Had Nathaniel been aware of her arrival even before Cooper rejected her? She filed the information away, determined to discuss it when they had a private moment. That moment proved elusive, however. Security. Concerns meant the ranch operated in a state of heightened vigilance. Nathaniel and Sheriff Taylor organized patrols of the property, and Catherine found herself rarely alone, always accompanied by at least one ranch hand when moving between buildings. Sleeping arrangements were addressed with practical directness. "I've had Daniel prepare the master suite," Nathaniel informed her as evening approached. "It's more secure, fewer windows, better sight lines to the approaches to the house." "And your quarters?" Catherine asked, trying to maintain composure. "While discussing such intimate matters, the adjoining room has a connecting door," he explained. "For propriety's sake, it can remain closed. For security's sake, it allows me to reach you quickly if needed." Their first night as husband and wife thus passed with a locked door between them, a concession to the hasty nature of their union that Catherine appreciated, even as she found herself lying awake, acutely aware of Nathaniel's presence just beyond the carved oak panels. The next morning brought a fresh complication. As Catherine reviewed breakfast arrangements with Martha, a rider approached from town, not a lawman as expected, but Mrs. Abigail Jenkins from the Clearwater Hotel. "Mrs. Jenkins," Catherine greeted her surprised. "This is unexpected. Please, come in from the cold." The older woman removed her snow-dusted cloak, her iron-grey hair escaping its pins from the windy ride. "Forgive the intrusion, Miss Winters, or Mrs. Blackwood, as I should say now. Word travels fast, even in winter." Once settled in the morning room with hot coffee, Mrs. Jenkins revealed the purpose of her visit. "Cooper came to the hotel last night," she said, without preamble. "Looking for information about you." Catherine's hands tightened around her cup. "What kind of information?" "Your background. Your connection to Nathaniel Blackwood before arriving in Colorado." Mrs. Jenkins's sharp eyes studied Catherine's reaction. "Fortunately, I know nothing of your past beyond what little you shared during your brief stay." "There is nothing to know," Catherine assured her. I answered Mr. Cooper's advertisement in good faith. He rejected me upon arrival. Mr. Blackwood, Nathaniel, offered employment when I found myself stranded. The rest happened naturally. Mrs. Jenkins nodded, seemingly satisfied. That's what I believed. Cooper's accusations seemed far-fetched, especially given his state. She leaned forward slightly. He's not well, Mrs. Blackwood. His eyes, there's something wrong there. Something beyond drink or disappointment. Did he threaten you? Catherine asked, concerned. Not directly, but he made it clear he believes you and Nathaniel conspired against him. Mrs. Jenkins sighed. I refused him a room, of course. Sheriff's been clear, no one's to shelter him. But I thought you should know he was asking specific questions about when you arrived and whether you received any messages before Nathaniel appeared. When Nathaniel returned from morning patrol and learned of Mrs. Jenkins's visit, his expression hardened. Cooper's getting desperate, he concluded, searching for evidence of a conspiracy that exists only in his mind. But why fixate on me? Catherine questioned. Surely his financial troubles predated my arrival. You represent a convenient explanation for his failures, Nathaniel explained, pacing the study despite his injured arm. If he can convince himself and others that his mail-order bride was part of a plot against him, then his problems aren't his own fault. Judge Harrington, who had extended his stay due to the situation, offered a legal perspective. Men facing financial ruin often seek external blame. I've seen similar cases where perfectly reasonable individuals develop elaborate theories of persecution when facing foreclosure. But there's something else, Catherine said slowly, recalling William's comment. Nathaniel, did you know I was coming before you met me at the hotel? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Nathaniel. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. News of Cooper's mail-order bride had circulated for weeks before your arrival. In a community this size, such arrangements draw attention, and you knew he rejected me. William was in town when the stage arrived. He witnessed Cooper's reaction upon seeing you and his subsequent instructions to make excuses. Nathaniel's voice tightened with barely suppressed anger at the memory. William reported this to me immediately, knowing Cooper's history of questionable dealings. So you did deliberately seek me out, Catherine said softly. Not by chance. I sought you out because Cooper's actions were unconscionable, Nathaniel corrected. Leaving a woman stranded 2,000 miles from home with no resources goes beyond mere rudeness into cruelty. Yet this gives credence to Cooper's claims of interference, Mr. Ellsworth pointed out, at least from a certain perspective. Nathaniel's jaw set stubbornly. I interfered with nothing. Cooper had already made his decision when I arrived at the hotel. I simply offered an alternative to abandonment. The revelation troubled Catherine, though not for the reasons the others might assume. It wasn't Nathaniel's intervention she questioned, but whether his initial interest had been driven purely by compassion rather than genuine attraction. That evening, as they dined alone for the first time since their hasty marriage, Catherine broached the subject directly. I need to know something, she said, setting down her fork. That day at the hotel, did you offer me employment out of pity? Nathaniel looked up, clearly startled by the question. Pity? No. Practical recognition. Of mutual need, perhaps. Evergreen required competent management, and you required a position. Not charity, then. A hint of exasperation crossed his face. Catherine, I've never been accused of excessive charity in my business dealings. If I'd wanted simply to help you, I could have purchased a stage ticket back east or found you a position in town. She acknowledged this with a slight nod. And now, this marriage, is it also a practical arrangement? Nathaniel set down his own utensils, giving her his full attention. You know it isn't. The legal protection it provides is merely a convenient justification for something I had already begun to contemplate. His blue eyes held hers steadily. Does the fact that I was aware of your situation before meeting you change your feelings? No, Catherine admitted, but it does make me question the foundation of yours. If we had met under different circumstances, if I had come west by choice rather than necessity, if you had first seen me in a ballroom rather than travel-worn in a frontier hotel, would you still have seen value in me? Understanding dawned in his expression. Ah, you question whether I truly chose you or merely rescued you because no one else would. Put so bluntly, the insecurity sounded foolish, yet Catherine couldn't deny its presence. Cooper rejected me, out of hand because of my age. It's not unreasonable to wonder if your interest stems from different motives than conventional attraction. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, considering her words. When he finally spoke, his voice held a gentleness rarely displayed in public. Catherine, I was married for 9 years to a woman society considered a great beauty. Emma was accomplished, educated from a respected Boston family. He leaned forward slightly, yet our marriage, while built on mutual respect and shared vision, lacked something essential, a meeting of souls that transcends convenience or compatibility. His gaze never left hers. What I feel for you isn't born of pity or practicality. It's recognition of strength that matches my own, of intelligence that challenges rather than defers, of beauty that reveals itself in how you move through the world rather than in superficial features that fade. Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. Even so, our beginning was hardly conventional. Convention, Nathaniel said dismissively, has limited relevance 2,000 miles from Boston drawing rooms. The frontier strips away pretense. We see each other as we truly are here, not as society dictates we should be. The conviction in his voice eased something in Catherine's heart. And what do you see when you look at me, Nathaniel Blackwood? His expression softened into a smile that transformed his usually stern countenance. I see a woman whose value increases rather than diminishes with years, whose character has been shaped by experience into something far more precious than the untested bloom of youth. He reached across the table to take her hand. I see my wife, chosen deliberately and with full awareness of her worth. The simple sincerity of his words dispelled Catherine's remaining doubts. Whatever unusual path had brought them together, the connection they now shared was genuine, built not on rescue or convenience, but on mutual recognition of qualities society often overlooked. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by urgent footsteps in the hall. Daniel appeared at the dining room door, his normally impassive face tense with concern. "Forgive the intrusion," he said. "Sheriff Taylor has just arrived with news. Cooper was spotted near the North Ridge late this afternoon, headed toward the Old Harper cabin." Nathaniel rose immediately. "The abandoned trapper's shelter, is Taylor certain?" "Yes, sir. One of the deputized men recognized him clearly, but couldn't approach safely given Cooper's armed state." "We'll need to organize a party to apprehend him," Nathaniel decided. "That cabin has only one approach. If we move quietly, we can surround it by dawn." Catherine listened to the rapid exchange with growing apprehension. "Surely you don't intend to participate personally?" she questioned, gesturing to his injured arm. "You can barely use your right hand." "I can ride and I can shoot. With my left if necessary," Nathaniel replied, already moving toward the door. "Cooper is my responsibility. He's threatening my home, my people. And you are still recovering from a bullet wound," Catherine countered, following him into the hall. "This is exactly the kind of reckless confrontation he wants." Nathaniel paused, turning back to her. For a moment she thought he might dismiss her concerns, but instead his expression softened. "You're right. Cooper is unbalanced enough to see my presence as personal challenge rather than law enforcement. He turned to Daniel. Inform Sheriff Taylor I'll provide men and resources, but he'll lead the operation. Once Daniel departed, Nathaniel drew Catherine into the study, closing the door for privacy. You've made a valid point, and I was wrong to dismiss it. Thank you. The simple acknowledgement, a powerful man acceding to his wife's counsel, touched Catherine more deeply than elaborate compliments might have done. I'm not trying to diminish your authority, she explained, only to protect what matters to me. I understand. His hand came up to cup her cheek briefly. And that's precisely why your perspective is so valuable. Emma, he stopped, then continued more carefully. Emma would have insisted I lead the party myself to demonstrate strength and resolve. Different women, different strengths. Catherine observed. I prefer strategies that preserve what we've built rather than risk it unnecessarily. A wisdom I'm increasingly grateful for. Nathaniel's expression grew serious. But there remains a decision to be made. Cooper's location provides an opportunity to end this threat, but it also presents risks. The sheriff's men are primarily townspeople, not experienced in winter tracking or potential armed confrontation. Catherine considered this. What if you coordinate from here? Provide guidance without physically joining the pursuit? A reasonable compromise. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Though it means another night of disruption for the household, the sheriff and his deputies will need shelter and supplies before moving out at first light. As Catherine helped organize accommodations for the incoming lawmen, she reflected on how swiftly her role had evolved, from rejected mail-order bride to household manager to full partner in decisions affecting Evergreen's safety and future. Each step had revealed not just Nathaniel's growing trust, but her own expanding sense of place and purpose. That night, as the ranch settled into uneasy vigilance, Catherine stood at the window of her new bedroom, the master suite that had once been Emma's domain. Unlike her previous unsettled night, she felt no ghostly presence, no sense of intrusion. Instead, she experienced a growing certainty that Evergreen was where she belonged, not as a replacement for what had been, but as the beginning of something new. A soft knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine. Nathaniel's voice came through the panels. Are you awake? Yes, she replied, crossing to unlock the door from her side. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His expression held a gravity that immediately put her on alert. What's happened? Nothing yet, he assured her. But Sheriff Taylor and I have been discussing strategy, and there's something you should know before tomorrow's operation begins. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The Harper cabin lies very near the property line between Evergreen and Cooper's land, directly adjacent to the water source Cooper claims I've been trying to seize. Catherine frowned. Is that significant? Potentially. If Cooper has chosen that location deliberately, he may be planning something beyond mere hiding. Nathaniel's face was grim in the lamplight. The Northridge watershed feeds both properties. If someone with Cooper's unstable mindset wanted to cause maximum damage, understanding dawned. You think he might contaminate the water supply? Poison it somehow? It's a possibility we can't dismiss, Nathaniel confirmed. Which is why, despite my promise to remain here, I've asked Sheriff Taylor to allow William to guide the party. He knows that terrain better than anyone, especially in winter conditions. Catherine absorbed this information, recognizing both the strategic necessity and Nathaniel's struggle between protection and decisive action. You're doing the right thing, she assured him, sending expertise rather than risking yourself unnecessarily. Relief flickered across his features. I hoped you would understand. This isn't just about personal safety. It's about ensuring the operation succeeds. I do understand. Catherine moved closer, reaching up to smooth a strand of hair that had fallen across his forehead. Leading isn't always about being physically present at the front. Sometimes it's about knowing when to deploy others' strengths. Nathaniel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture so intimate it sent warmth cascading through her. How did Cooper fail to see what stood before him? He wondered aloud. How could he look at you and perceive anything but extraordinary? Value? Before Catherine could respond, he continued, his voice lower. I didn't come here only to discuss strategy, though propriety suggested I needed a practical reason to knock on your door. Propriety, Catherine repeated, a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of their situation. Between husband and wife, we married under unusual circumstances, Nathaniel reminded her. I promised you time, space to adjust to this change in our relationship. Catherine studied his face, the strong lines softened by lamplight, the blue eyes holding equal parts determination and uncertainty. This powerful man, accustomed to commanding others and controlling his domain, stood before her, now seeking permission rather than asserting rights. Perhaps, she said softly, we've had enough time apart. Something flickered in his eyes, hope mingled with desire. Catherine, are you certain? The legal necessity of our marriage doesn't obligate you. She silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. I didn't marry you for legal protection, Nathaniel. I married you because, against all expectation, I found someone who sees me clearly and values what he sees. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer. You're trembling, he observed. It's been many years since I was held like this, she admitted, and never by someone who mattered as you do. The vulnerability in her confession seemed to touch him deeply. Then we'll discover this together, he murmured, bending to kiss her with a gentleness that belied his strength. As the lamp burned low and winter winds swept across evergreen sleeping acres, Catherine Winters Blackwood found herself embraced, not out of duty or convention, but with a passion born of genuine appreciation for the woman she had become through years and experience. Samuel, Cooper's rejection, once a wound to her pride and security, now seemed the first step on a path leading precisely where she was meant to be, in the arms of a man who recognized that true value, like fine wine, only deepens with the passage of time. Dawn broke over Evergreen with slate-grey skies, promising snow. The search party departed, Sheriff Taylor leading deputies and ranch hands, with William guiding them toward the Harper cabin where Cooper was reportedly hiding. They know the territory, Nathaniel reassured Catherine as they watched from the porch. Cooper is one man, increasingly unstable. It's precisely that instability that concerns me, she replied. In Nathaniel's study, they established a command center. Maps spread across the desk marked water sources, shelters, and escape routes. Daniel brought reports from outlying ranch hands, while Martha kept coffee and food available for messengers. Catherine found unexpected satisfaction in this partnership with Nathaniel. They worked in natural synchronicity, his knowledge of the terrain, complemented by her organizational skills, his strategic thinking, balanced by her practical considerations. You've done this before, Nathaniel observed as she efficiently organized. Incoming reports. My father's business collapse required similar skills. Organizing creditors, managing dwindling resources, maintaining appearances while everything crumbled internally. Understanding dawned in his expression. That's why Cooper's rejection struck so deeply. It echoed previous losses. Catherine hadn't considered this connection. Perhaps, when you've rebuilt once from nothing, the prospect of facing it again is particularly daunting. You won't face it again, Nathaniel promised. Not while I draw breath. A commotion erupted outside, pounding hooves and urgent voices. They hurried to find a deputy returned, his horse lathered despite the cold. "Cooper's not at the cabin." He gasped. It was a decoy. William found Prince heading toward the Upper Springs. The implications weren't lost on Catherine. The Upper Springs formed the headwaters feeding both properties. If Cooper intended to contaminate the water supply, that would be the most effective point. "How long ago?" Nathaniel demanded. "Hour, maybe more." "Trails getting harder to follow with new snow." Nathaniel turned to Daniel. "Prepare my horse." "You can't go," Catherine protested, though she knew he would brook no argument. "Cooper's heading for the springs," he countered. "If he contaminates that water, it affects every property downstream." The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "Sheriff believes Cooper may have rigged explosives. William found blasting powder packaging." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "I've dealt with mining explosives. Most of these men haven't." He turned to Catherine. "I need to go." Though every instinct urged her to prevent him from riding into danger, Catherine recognized the necessity. This wasn't mere pride, but legitimate responsibility. "Then go," she said, squeezing his hand, "but come back to me." Hours passed with agonizing slowness as the promised snowfall arrived. Catherine maintained operations from the study, but with communication now cut off by weather, she could do little but wait and worry. "He'll return," Martha assured her, removing untouched tea. "I've known Mr. Blackwood 15 years. Man's got more lives than a mountain cat." Catherine attempted a smile. "I believe you. It's just that you found something precious and fear losing it," Martha finished with unexpected insight. "Natural enough. But Mr. Blackwood didn't survive building Evergreen by taking foolish chances." When the study door opened unexpectedly, Catherine turned with such hope that disappointment physically pained her when only Daniel entered. "There's something you should see," he said. In the kitchen, a young woman sat huddled by the stove. Perhaps 17, with dirty blonde hair and haunted eyes, she clutched a steaming mug between reddened hands. "Found her at the south gate," Daniel explained. "Nearly frozen. Says her name is Abigail Cooper." "Cooper?" Catherine repeated, startled. "Samuel Cooper's daughter," the girl confirmed in a whisper. "Please, I need help. My father, he's not well. He's going to hurt people." Catherine took a seat opposite her. "The sheriff and Mr. Blackwood are looking for him now." "They won't find him where they're searching," Abigail said urgently. "That's just a distraction. He's planning to destroy Evergreen itself." Cold dread washed through Catherine. "What do you mean?" "He left plans in his desk, diagrams of this house, notes about where to place charges for maximum damage." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. "He's not himself anymore. After Mother died, he started changing. The drinking got worse. Then the paranoia." Abigail pulled a folded paper from inside her coat. "I took this before I ran away. It shows where he's planning to place the explosives." Daniel examined the diagram, his expression grim. "These are the support structures for the main house. If charges were placed here, the entire east wing would collapse," Martha finished, horror in her voice. Catherine struggled to process this new threat. The search parties, including Nathaniel, were miles away pursuing a false trail. Meanwhile, Evergreen stood vulnerable. "When?" she asked Abigail. "Tonight," the girl whispered. "He said Blackwood would be gone, chasing shadows, that it would be poetic justice to have him return to rubble." Daniel moved toward the door. "I'll organize the remaining hands to search the grounds." "No," Catherine countermanded. "That's exactly what he would expect. Men rushing about, creating confusion. We need a methodical approach." She turned to Martha. "How many people remain on the property?" "2 stable hands. The kitchen girl, Lucy, and Jane upstairs, and old Thomas watching the south pasture," Martha reported. "Not enough for a proper search," Daniel pointed out. Catherine studied the diagram again. "We don't search everywhere. We focus on these specific points. Cooper's background is in ranching, not demolition. These plans are likely based on mining techniques he's seen. Standard practice for removing support columns, Daniel agreed. Exactly. And effective mining demolition requires precise placement. Catherine stood, strategy forming. We inspect these exact locations. If Cooper is acting alone, he can only be in one place. We organize in pairs, move quietly, and communicate with signals rather than shouting. As she outlined the search plan, Catherine felt a strange calm replace her panic. For months, she had managed Evergreen's household affairs, learning every corner of its structure. Now that knowledge would serve to protect it. "What about the girl?" Martha asked, nodding toward Abigail. "She stays with me," Catherine decided. "If this is a trap, better to keep her close." Gathering lanterns and tools, the small group dispersed according to Catherine's directions. She and Abigail took the East Wing basement, the foundation area most critical to the house's integrity. As they descended the narrow stairs into the darkness, Abigail whispered, "Why are you trusting me? I could be helping him." Catherine raised her lantern to illuminate the girl's face. "Are you?" "No, I want to stop him before he destroys himself completely." "Then we understand each other," Catherine replied. "Sometimes protecting those we love means standing against their worst impulses." The basement stretched before them, stone walls supporting massive wooden beams. Catherine moved toward the northeast corner, indicated in Cooper's diagram. "What are we looking for?" Abigail asked. "Anything that doesn't belong." Fresh tool marks, disturbed dust, packages. They had examined 2 support columns when a faint scratching sound froze them in place. Catherine lowered the lantern immediately, plunging them into near darkness. The scratching came again, followed by a muffled thump, somewhere deeper in the shadows. Someone else was down here, moving parallel to them. Catherine's heart thundered. Samuel Cooper was not miles away on the North Ridge. He was here in Evergreen's basement, preparing its destruction. And now she stood between him and his revenge, with only his daughter and a lantern as resources. Catherine pressed Abigail against the wall, finger to her lips. The scratching sounds continued, followed by a metallic clink. "It's him," Abigail whispered, barely audible. Catherine assessed their options quickly. They were unarmed, except for Daniel's pocketknife, facing a man with explosives and a consuming hatred. Direct confrontation would be suicide. "Stay here," she breathed into Abigail's ear. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, get Daniel." Before the girl could protest, Catherine removed her shoes and set the lantern down. Years of managing households had taught her to move silently when checking on servants. Now that skill might save. Evergreen, guided by the intermittent sounds, she crept deeper into the basement. A faint glow appeared around a corner. Cooper's lantern, dimmed to avoid detection from above. She inched forward until she could see him. Samuel Cooper knelt beside a central support beam, methodically packing something around its base. Even in profile, the change in him since Clearwater was shocking. His face had hollowed, eyes sunken and feverish in the lantern light. His hands worked with unnatural precision, despite their trembling. Catherine retreated silently, returning to Abigail. "He's placing charges on the central beam," she whispered. "We need Daniel." "No time," Abigail responded, eyes wide. "Once set, he'll light the fuses and run." Catherine made a swift decision. "Follow me upstairs." Quietly. In the kitchen, she outlined what she'd seen. "We need a distraction," she told Daniel. "Something to draw him away from those charges." Martha stepped forward. "Flood the basement," she suggested. "Emergency water release from the kitchen pump feeds directly down there. It would wash out the powder before it could ignite." Daniel agreed. "But someone needs to remove whatever detonating device he's rigged," Catherine added, "while he's distracted." Before anyone could volunteer, a tremendous crash echoed from below, followed by Cooper's enraged shout. He'd discovered their lantern. "Now!" Catherine ordered. Daniel wrestled the emergency lever on the kitchen pump, while Martha and Lucy raced to open all water spigots in the house, maximizing pressure to the basement flood channel. A rush of water surged through pipes, then a distant splash as it poured into the basement. Catherine grabbed a kitchen knife and headed back toward the stairs. Abigail caught her arm. "That's my father down there," she pleaded. "I know. I'm trying to save him from himself," Catherine answered gently. Freeing herself, she descended cautiously, knife gripped tightly. Water was already ankle-deep, flowing from wall pipes. Cooper stood in shock, watching his carefully placed charges dissolve in the rising water. "No!" he screamed when he spotted Catherine. "You've ruined everything!" "It's over, Cooper," she called, keeping distance between them. "Abigail is here. She showed us your plans, Abigail." Confusion crossed his haggard face. "My daughter would never betray me." "She's trying to save you," Catherine countered. "This destruction won't solve anything." Cooper drew himself up, water swirling around his legs. "You understand nothing. Blackwood has taken everything. My future, my pride, my bride. You rejected me," Catherine reminded him steadily. "Remember, I wasn't young enough, pretty enough. You took one look and decided I had no value." Something shifted in Cooper's expression. Recognition, perhaps even shame. "I was a fool," he admitted, shoulders sagging. "But then he took you, proving again that everything I discard, he claims and profits from." "No one took me," Catherine said firmly. "I made my own choices when you left me stranded. Nathaniel saw my worth where you saw only my years, Father." Abigail appeared on the stairs behind Catherine. "Please stop this." Cooper stared at his daughter, momentarily frozen. In that instant, Daniel burst in from another entrance, tackling Cooper into the rising water. They struggled briefly before Daniel pinned him down. "The charges," Catherine urged, splashing toward the central beam. "Fuses are wet." Cooper laughed bitterly as Daniel secured his wrists with rope. Too late to be a hero. Dawn was breaking when Nathaniel returned with Sheriff Taylor and the search party. They found Cooper secured in the tool shed, Evergreen still standing, and Catherine directing the removal of the diffused explosives from the basement. When Nathaniel dismounted and saw Catherine safe, his expression transformed from grim determination to profound relief. Without regard for propriety or the watching crowd, he crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "When we realized Cooper's trail was false," he said hoarsely, "I feared the worst." "We handled it," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Abigail warned us of his plans." Nathaniel looked over her head to where Cooper's daughter sat wrapped in blankets on the porch. "That took courage." "She's much like her father once was, I suspect," Catherine observed, before bitterness consumed him. In the following days, as winter gradually released its grip on the valley, decisions were made. Samuel Cooper would face charges for attempted destruction of property, but thanks to Nathaniel's intervention with the judge, consideration was given to his mental state. He would receive treatment rather than mere imprisonment. Abigail accepted Catherine's offer to remain at Evergreen while her father recovered. "You need education," Catherine insisted. "A chance to become more than circumstances might otherwise allow." Spring arrived with vibrant green replacing winter's white palette. Evergreen Ranch thrived under the joint stewardship of Nathaniel and Catherine, whose partnership had become the talk of the territory, not as scandal, but as inspiration. On the anniversary of Catherine's arrival in Colorado, they hosted a gathering for the valley's residents. While Nathaniel spoke with neighbors, Judge Harrington approached Catherine, where she stood watching children play on the lawn. "Remarkable transformation," the judge commented. "Both Evergreen and its master." Catherine smiled. "Life rarely follows expected paths, Your Honor." "Indeed." He studied her thoughtfully. I've seen many marriages in my position, Mrs. Blackwood, few with the strength of yours, founded on genuine appreciation rather than convenience or passion alone. We found each other at exactly the right time, Catherine replied, when we both had enough life experience to recognize true value. As the judge moved away, Nathaniel joined her, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity of deep connection. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About the path that brought you here?" Catherine considered the journey from rejected mail-order bride to mistress of Evergreen. "None," she answered truthfully. "Samuel Cooper's rejection was the first step toward finding where I truly belonged." Nathaniel's eyes, warm with affection, held hers. "His greatest mistake became my life's greatest fortune." Together they watched the sun setting behind distant mountains, painting Colorado's vast sky in spectacular color. Catherine felt the weight of Nathaniel's arm around her shoulders and the solid ground of Evergreen beneath her feet, both reminders that sometimes life's richest rewards come not in youth, but in the fullness of time, when we've gained the wisdom to recognize their true and lasting value. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.